Hi there and welcome to this episode of Kids Fishing. Have you ever been fishing with a friend and wondered why they've been really successful catching a lot of fish and you haven't? And what's the difference between the way that you fish and they fish? So I thought I would talk about line control and the impact that has on your fishing success and your ability to hook and catch fish. So line control is the ability to stay in contact with your bait and your sinker without necessarily keeping your line tight and affecting the way that the bait sits in the water, which can often put the fish off. So the ability to stay in contact with your bait, which can also lead to the ability to strike the fish as well when they bite your line, so that you can feel what's happening with your bait in the water without keeping a really tight line. Often it's a balance between keeping in contact with your bait but leaving just enough slack in the line so that you can kind of still feel what's happening with your bait, but without bouncing your sinker on the bottom or without kind of affecting the way that your bait sits in the water. And that subtle balance between the two is sometimes quite difficult to achieve, especially when you're in a boat and the boat is moving up and down in the swell, so the tension in your line is moving, or when you're in a strong current, when the wind is strong and therefore it's difficult to sense exactly what is happening with your bait and your line without really keeping that tension up, or any other condition where it's very difficult to keep your line not tight but not totally slack either, sort of just in between. From what I've seen of kids fishing, they don't really understand the concept of line tension and tip control. So often their rod tips are all over the place, they're lifting up high, they're moving around, and that brings the bait around in the water. It changes the tension on the line, and they really don't get the idea of line control and rod tension. And so I think it's quite an important thing to be able to learn, because it does make a big difference, specifically when you've got small fish and they tend to take the line and run. And your ability to be able to strike them as they have the bait in their mouth makes a big difference as to whether you'll hook those fish, but also your ability to know when your bait has gone and just what's generally happening with your fishing line in the water. I think that one of the things that makes a difference to your line control and your ability to strike is the sensitivity of the rod tip on your line. So in this case we've got quite a thin rod tip. This is just a little spinning rod, and as you can see the rod tip has some sensitivity, and what that allows you to do is to also strike the fish as well. So you can effectively whip your rod tip against the line and put in a strike, and in a way that's a little bit more responsive than if you had a thicker rod tip or a boat roller or something like that. So certain types of rods are going to give you a little bit more line control and a little bit more ability to strike the bait and hopefully hook that fish. So in summary, I think that line control and your ability to sense what is going on is a really important factor in the success of fishing. I know personally that when I'm fishing on a really calm day where there's no wind, my ability to sense fish activity and to strike fish is much higher than when it's a really windy day. In fact, I hate fishing on strong windy days because it's very hard to tell what's happening with your line and with fish biting, because the line is moving in and out depending on the breeze, and the rod is moving, and it's just, unless you're getting really big strikes, it's really hard to tell actually what's happening with your line. So I think that line control, rod tip sensitivity, and your ability to stay in contact with your bait without really tensing the line makes a big difference to fishing success, and it's a key thing to be able to teach kids rod tip control and line sensitivity at a young age, because I think it will increase the chances of hooking a fish. I'd like to make a shout out to another fellow fisherman I saw down at the Devonport Wharf the other day. Hope you catch some great fish, and we'll see you another time in action. I'd love to know your thoughts on what you think about line control and tip sensitivity, and whether you have found it make a difference to you fishing with your child, and whether you've taught that kind of subject matter to your child as well, and whether that's made any difference to success of fishing. Leave your comments below, and if this is your first time to Kids Fishing, then I invite you to subscribe for more fishing tips and tricks and to follow our Kids Fishing adventures. Thanks for watching this episode of Kids Fishing.
Kids Fishing.